Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, the creative content writer here in Chesterfield, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. We got a little bit of a different show for you today. We've done a lot of interesting stuff over the first year of the show, and we've certainly brought you a lot of guests with some interesting stories. I'm not sure we've got one, at least in this in-depth, as the one we're going to tell you today. I want to introduce Bailey Hilliard, who is with Harp. I will let her kind of talk a little bit about how exactly she came to be with Harp and that kind of thing. But first, Bailey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Very glad to have you. I'm very glad that you get to talk to us about this. The more I find out about this program, the more it blows me away. The work that you guys can do, but also sort of the way you do it. Before we get started, let's start with talking me through what Harp is and how you kind of came to be. What's your background and how you came to be involved?
Sure. So again, my name is Bailey Hilliard, and I'm the programs coordinator, manager, whatever you want to call me, over at the Chesterfield County Jail. And so I have my master's degree in social work. I'm from Ohio State. I'm a Buckeye girl.
Okay.
But I grew up with, my dad has been in law enforcement my whole life. I grew up and he was on all these crazy calls and doing all these things and running a jail. And I was actually told that people in jail were bad guys. I was told dad's out catching bad guys. And that was kind of the narrative I grew up hearing.
Right.
And then as really society has continued to evolve, and then fortunately with my schooling, I knew I wanted to work with people with mental health and people that were struggling and people with trauma, but I didn't really know where. And my dad actually, they have a program in Columbus that's much smaller than the one here for women with opioid addictions and mental health. And he's like, come see this program.
Right.
I was like, okay. I'm like trying to figure out what to do with my life.
Right.
And I went to Shadow and actually ended up staying for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
I fell in love with
Hotel California.
Yeah, fell in love with the population. And I met these women that were just beautiful and had these stories of resiliency and redemption and recovery that had been through things that I couldn't even imagine. And I realized that these aren't bad people at all. These are people who are traumatized and are sick and have a lot of things working against them, and they really just need to be loved and cared for.
Right.
And so that kind of partnered with my schooling. I fell into this field. I moved to Richmond, Virginia. I got married.
Okay.
I worked at Central State Psychiatric Hospital for about a year.
Okay.
And then found Chesterfield. I was always talking about, I miss the jail. It was a really weird, man, I want to be back in the jail. I miss people who want to do something different.
Right.
And I think that's really one of the key themes between why I love Harp and why I love the people that we get to work with, is because they're really people who want better for themselves. They want to do something different with their lives than what they've been doing in the past. Right. And so found my way to Chesterfield, found my way to Harp, and have just loved every minute of it. I think I have the coolest job in the world, and I'm so grateful. But Harp itself, so it originally was the Heroin Addiction Recovery Program. And so it started back in 2015 because Sheriff Leonard actually saw the 10th overdose death in the county happen. And he knew that people were coming in and out of the jail that were struggling with heroin addiction, mostly because we saw people starting to detox. You have people who all of a sudden are really, really sick inside the jail. And if you've ever walked through a jail intake area, you know that there are people that are struggling. And so we knew we had people who needed help. And then you know that you have people who, when you actually talk to them, they want to do something different. And so Sheriff Leonard actually went and talked to our medical director, Dr. Gay, that day and was, hey, people are struggling. And they decided then and there, Sheriff Leonard started the program the very next day. And so it started really slowly. And he would really just go down into intake every day and say, hey, are you struggling with addiction? And do you want to do something different? We're trying to start something to help people, really. And it's evolved, over the past 6 years into what it is now. Midway through, probably 3 or 4 years ago, they decided to change it to Helping Addicts Recover Progressively. And that's because it's not just heroin. It's fentanyl, it's methamphetamines, it's alcohol. We're actually seeing a lot of people in recently on alcohol being their primary presenting drug of choice, actually. And so it's evolved really from this thing of just kind of grabbing people in intake that are struggling and asking them if they want help to it's a pretty robust program right now, and we're really proud of it.
So I want to talk through a little bit sort of like how the program actually works. And for those of you who are viewing the show right now, you're probably seeing a flow chart that sort of has sort of the cycle, all right, of addiction and sort of the way that you guys view it. And can you talk to me a little bit about sort of, how Harp works and how Harp works to break that cycle, to essentially break that wheel?
Yeah. So the cycle of addiction is people end up going on to commit crimes of survival.
Right.
So when you become addicted to a substance, withdrawal is the worst thing that could ever happen.
Right.
It is more painful than any flu, any sort of sickness, and people will do anything in order to not have to withdraw. It's not because they don't want something different. It's because withdrawal it's so scary to people who struggle with addiction issues. And really, you see people commit crimes in order to get their drug of choice, in order to survive.
So they can come off those withdrawals.
Yeah. Not to come off of the withdrawals. You'll do things like shoplifting or...
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. So going through the cycle. So you have this addiction and then you're going to commit a crime in order to get money or get your drug of choice so that you don't have to withdraw.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yep.
And so that's where they then come to us. They come to us in the jail,
right.
And they get to our programming. So you can get into the program really, any way possible that you can think of. People have probably gotten in.
Right.
But the biggest piece is that it's a voluntary program.
Right.
It's something that you have to be willing to do the work because it's a lot of work.
Right.
At its core, the program. So I think maybe later there's we call it a multifaceted approach is really the biggest thing. And it's because people in general, we're whole beings. There are many different parts of ourselves. There's a spiritual side. There's an education piece. There's your family. There's all of these different things that make us human.
Right.
And so in order to help rehabilitate these individuals, we have to treat them as whole human beings.
Right.
We know that in recovery, really the biggest and most important thing that we can do is have that peer support. So the program itself is really, really heavy on peer support. And what that is just another individual who is in recovery and is doing well will come in and they will teach groups for us and kind of offer guidance to the participants and teach them and share their story. And then the program inside of it, we have mentors in the program, which you will hear is not usually pretty common because of being in a correctional facility. You can't give one inmate jurisdiction over another inmate, but we actually have programs deputies. So in the documentary, you'll see Deputy Seals and Deputy Haga. Now it's Deputy Dolan, but they work really closely with I call them program participants instead of inmates, but they'll work with the participants and the mentors really closely so that they're kind of making decisions as a unit and that the peers have a really heavy say in what we do. Again, at its core too, it's behavior modification.
Right.
And that's, again, it goes back to, we don't want people committing crimes when they get back out.
Right.
And so there are, oh my gosh, it's probably like 72 rules that they have to follow in the program.
All right. So I would like you to start reciting them from the start.
I can't do it. And it's things like, one of the ones that I see the most is there's no cussing in front of Miss Bailey as one of the rules that they have.
One of the rules, nice.
And it comes back to, and it's not because I'm worried about a swear word. It's because of showing respect to authority figures, but then also, oh my gosh, in a work environment someday, I can't be cussing in front of my boss a bunch.
Right.
And so it's teaching these life skills that maybe these individuals didn't learn or aren't practicing and reinforcing them so that they're able to then go and do them in the community.
Right.
It's things like not stealing. Stealing is a rule where it's an automatic removal. That's for a couple of different things. But I saw one girl who came in and she did 9 months because she stole a Slim Jim and an ice cream cone. She was a habitual stealer. And that was because of her addiction. But we have to teach her not to steal.
Right.
That's something that she has to learn, those behaviors.
Right.
But also when working and learning those behaviors, you have to look at the root cause of a lot of these things. And so often it comes back to trauma.
Right.
We are working with a very traumatized population. There's a thing in kind of the psych trauma world called an adverse childhood experience.
Okay.
And the general population, so it's 10 different markers of childhood trauma.
Okay.
And so it's things like physical, emotional abuse, not having a parent in the home, all of those things. The general population is going to score about a 4 on that scale.
Right.
Your incarcerated population is going to be double that in almost every single category. And then throwing on addiction too. So we know that the population that we're working with is really, really traumatized.
Right.
We know they're traumatized. We know they're struggling with behaviors. And so from a programming standpoint, we have to address all of that.
Right.
And so we have the peer piece. It's huge. I think everyone will tell you it is the most important thing of what we do.
Right.
We also offer the peer recovery specialist. There's a 72-hour certification that they can get, and we offer that in the jail.
Okay.
And that's because we want to be able to send people who are equipped and ready back out into our community.
Right.
That's something that I think we are most proud of is if you look at a lot of the recovery community in Richmond, Chesterfield, Henrico,
right.
A lot of them actually are Harp alumni, people who are working at a lot of recovery houses, working in a lot of the recovery agencies. A lot of them have actually come through our program. And it's something that we probably have at least 50 individuals working in recovery.
Right.
And that's something I think because of the experience that they get while they are in the jail and then getting the training, I think that's a huge, huge thing that, we don't scream that from the rooftops enough.
Right.
So that's the peer piece.
Right.
And then the next piece is going to be the clinical piece. We have a partnership with the CSB.
Okay.
They have been amazing. We have 3 different clinicians that work with us.
Okay.
And so we do all sorts of groups in the program. So we do everything from pretty intense trauma therapy. We do stuff, it's called Rising Strong and Trauma Tools, where you're learning to kind of own your story and then some very practical skills in order to basically get through and cope with your trauma.
Okay.
Things that for so long these individuals have used a drug as their coping skill.
Right.
And we have to teach them other coping skills so that you can deal with life.
Right.
We do a neuroscience class, so you're understanding your brain, understanding why you
feel this way. Right. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy classes. And then we're actually doing a class that's called MORE. It's Mindful Oriented Recovery Enhancement. Okay. It's a pretty new curriculum out of the University of Utah that has been shown to reduce opioid cravings up to like 40% for people who complete the class.
Wow.
So we're really trying to get any best practice thing here and with our people. We're doing EMDR therapy, which for trauma is like one of the best therapies you can do. Moral recognition therapy.
Right.
Really, if it's something that can help someone that's struggling with addiction, we have it and we are doing it on the clinical side.
Right.
And that's partially because everyone is different. What works for you is not going to work for me, and what works for me is not going to work for you. And so you have to figure out where an individual is at and meet them with what they really need.
Right.
So I think that's the huge piece of clinical, and to have a counselor that you can meet with one-on-one that you trust.
Right.
I think a lot of what we do comes back to trust and safety. And these individuals, they trust us, and I don't totally know why. Sometimes it's the greatest privilege.
Yeah.
But to the point where the sheriff has an open door policy. So if anyone is struggling with addiction, or if they have been through the program and want to come in and share a story of hope or just get support from the community, they can come back into the jail without charges and sit in on a group or get peer support and all of those things. And the fact that people choose to come back into jail, it's not something that you hear of anywhere else. It just, again, my dad's chief in Columbus, and he's like, will you do what? Like, this is not, like,
normal.
You're letting people who struggle with addiction, who have past charges, come in and sit in on groups. And I think that is a key to the later kind of continuity of care, but also just having an environment where people feel safe. Right. And that's huge.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to a couple things. One, you kind of did a great job of really kind of laying out there, when you say holistic, you really mean holistic. And it reminded me, and this may be really simplistic, but I'm curious to get your thought here. Like, they say that as a kid is learning English, that if you teach them another language at the same time, that typically that tends to hold. Yeah. And I wonder if the psychology aspect, or those, the sort of coping skills that you give, and being able to do all of this at once. So not only am I understanding, okay, why am I feeling this way? I'm also breaking down what I actually feel. And at the same time, I'm also understanding from somebody else, hey, I also felt this at the same point. Yeah. And it seems like if all of these trains can kind of run at the same time, that they have a deeper impact. And I'm curious to get your sort of point of view on how, if the holistic piece of it is the reason why you're seeing so much success. And I'm just curious if you have a number of, how many folks have come through the program and come to that other side. I'm just curious if you have that as well.
So are you like asking how many people are in recovery now?
Well, just more like in terms of like how many people you would say sort of quote unquote completed your program, right? So people who came inside, who went through, who went out, and maybe they're, got jobs, whatever, have kind of gotten to that other side of their addiction. Not necessarily that you're really over it per se, but I'm just thinking like in terms of the number of people who have come through your program who you would say sort of as close as can be sort of described, completed it.
Yeah. So it's probably helpful. So the program itself, we have anywhere on the male side from 50 to 60 individuals at any given time, and then anywhere from really 25 to 40 women, depending on all sorts of different things. And really, I mean, over the past 6 years, I think we're around having had 2,000 participants come through. Okay. Some multiple incarcerations.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
But it's the number of who's successful and who's been out there and completed, I have no idea. Right. It's not something that you can really track.
Right. And that's and if I don't mean to cut, but that's exactly the point I was going to make, which is that like, you're very mindful, like, as you said earlier, that there's so many people who have come through your program who are now doing stuff in other places, who are carrying that message elsewhere. And that impact is much larger than you could ever really track, because you can't know, this person who went through the program who then impacted these 10 people, who then impacted these 10 people. It's exponential. And I can imagine that is extremely rewarding for all of you who are involved with it.
It's talking of like the reach of the program. I have two different thoughts. So one is like, what's kind of our definition of success? Right. And for us in Harp, it's that you are healthy and alive. Right. Healthy, happy with your family, doing what you want to do, and that you're alive. Right. And for some people, that's, the CEO of True Recovery, which is a pretty big recovery organization in the area. She's a Harp alumni. Okay. Like, she was one of the originals. We were actually with her this morning, and it's like, oh my God, the reach that she has, that's hundreds of participants that she's influencing. But then you also have to realize that we also have people who they are just able to go home and be a good mom and dad. Right. And those kids have a parent that's present.
Right. And there's that impact.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And then that goes back to the whole trauma, right? And the idea of like those markers and breaking that same cycle, which kind of goes back to breaking the wheel a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then a really cool story, just talking of like the reach of Harp. And this is, follow me and correct me and tell me if I lose you, because there's a wide net.
I will do my best.
So I have two guys who recently came into Harp. They're about 30 days into the program. Okay. And one of them is like, I had no idea that recovery was even a thing. He's like, I didn't even know that that you could be clean. And then I have another guy who his wife is in North Carolina, and she's actually in recovery herself. And so he's still struggling with his addiction, but she's in recovery doing well. And first guy who doesn't know addiction, that you can have recovery, he reaches out to his long-term girlfriend, and she's in Indiana, and is like, she's like, I think I want recovery. And we're like, okay. And he comes up to me, the two of them, they're like, Miss Bailey, can you help us? Like, we're trying to figure out how to help her get to Richmond so that she can get in some of the recovery systems that we have here. And I was like, okay, like, sure, we'll figure it out. Right. And the guy whose girlfriend is in recovery in North Carolina paid for a train ticket for a girl in Indiana to come to Richmond so that she could go to one of the recovery houses that we work with. And I don't think any of us thought that she was going to actually do it. Right. Yeah. Right. There's a couple girls that I had texted that live in the houses and run the houses. And I was like, hey, I think this girl's coming by train. Like, this person paid for their ticket and she's coming. And they're like, okay, if she comes, like, we have a bed for her. Like, we'll help her. And she came. And she did. She showed up. And then the Uber basically lost her. And and then the girls, because they knew that she was just in downtown Richmond at the bus or train station, they went themselves. There were two of them went, and having never met this girl, went and picked her up and took her to the house and took her in. And she's still in the house to this day.
That's awesome.
And that's the type of community that I texted 3 Harp alumni, and they were helping current guys in Harp. Right. Significant others.
Right. Yeah.
The web of that is, it's honestly just comical. It's like, how did this happen?
Right. Well, that kind of goes to something I wanted to talk about, which is that like the program doesn't stop just because somebody is released. Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier, just the idea of it. And you might be, if you're watching this, you might be seeing a slide now that shows kind of like the you guys have like a Facebook group for folks who are, on the outside. And I don't know. I think that's the part for me beyond like the peer piece, is that it just keeps going because, to the nature of addiction is that it's not a mountain to climb. It's a desert, and you're never really sure what's off in the horizon. And I can understand from the standpoint of running the program that must give the folks who are involved in a whole lot of hope, because they can not only go through, but then they get to that other side and they get to be a part of this community.
Yeah.
And a few minutes ago, you mentioned the documentary. We haven't touched on that just yet, but at the premiere, one thing that I was really struck by being in the audience was just the feel of community. It almost felt like I was kind of to that side of the section, and there was a whole lot of alums who were clearly sitting together, and there was a lot of camaraderie, and there was obviously community there, and it almost made me feel like, oh man, like this is like something really special that like like in those weird situations where almost like you felt out of place, right? Because they were so together, and that sense of community is such a sense of hope. And I'm just curious, as you've heard from folks who are part of that Facebook group or are part of it on the outside, how important that has been to helping them as they continue to sort of deal with their own, whether it's their moving forward or any potential relapses or whatever. I'm just curious to get some of your point of view on how important the piece of it is after release.
The piece of it after release is the most important piece of it. You have hit like the nail on the head with it. The Facebook group is awesome. There's probably 600 people in the Facebook group, and there's a couple of people who just post like daily readings every day, or if there's events, or if there's someone struggling, you can reach out. And so I think that's big. But we also have a meeting that is it's actually in Richmond. It's in Monument, where anyone who's struggling with addiction can go. But we call it the Harp Meeting. It's Harp RVA. Right. And it's just people who have been through the program meet every Tuesday night at 6:30 and go. But that just doesn't even begin to scratch the surface, because when they are with us in the program, they build real genuine connections, because you're kind of going to war of the hardest, ugliest pieces of yourself with people who are also doing the same thing, and who are supporting you through some really hard things. And I think the piece of people who are recovering coming back into the jail is huge, because they maintain those relationships. But then when they get released, if they choose to go to a recovery home, they're going to a home with people who they've lived with in jail, but who they've done a lot of that hard work with. A lot of the individuals in recovery that we do work with will tell you, my best friends were from Harp. They will tell you, my 6 best friends are from Harp, because the one thing you have to change when you get into recovery is everything. Everything. Right. You have to change people, places, and things. And so most of them don't have people. Some will have family members or a couple supportive people, but oftentimes your friends were really toxic. And so to find other like-minded individuals
who have similar experiences, who or had similar goals.
It's the most important piece, and that connection, because really we're all just kind of the feeling you described, that camaraderie and that community. We're all just people who want to belong somewhere, and we're all just people who want connection. And I think they have been able to find and foster connection in Harp, and it doesn't make sense because it's in a jail, and you wouldn't think that it would be there, but really that is, I think, the key piece. And it's, man, I feel comfortable to go to this recovery house because I know so-and-so's there, and this person's there, and that person's there. And
so-and-so was there, and so-and-so,
and then now I can go to meetings with these 3 people and meet their networks. And it's really the expansive network that has been created is just, it's really cool. And it's a huge piece of what we do.
You what you're kind of describing there is a lot about trust. And I want to go back to wrap up. I want to go back to the documentary. So for folks who aren't aware, a documentarian and her crew came to the jail to sort of take a real in-depth look at what you guys do. It was on Discovery Plus, premiered several months ago. We were fortunate enough to talk to Beth and to talk to the sheriff about it at the premiere. And I'm just curious, as somebody who, you're in social work, right? You didn't necessarily, granted, you came to this podcast recording today knowing you'd be on video, but I'm guessing you didn't envision, someday that every move you made for several months at work would be recorded. And I'm just curious, as you look back on that experience, obviously, being as invested in the program as you are and in the folks who participate, I can imagine that it was an incredible experience. But I'm just curious what it was like for you to be filmed every day and what that was like looking back on it now.
It's a loaded question. Getting into social work, I would have never in my wildest dreams ever imagined being on a documentary.
Right.
I got into jail work because I think it's one of the most underserved populations and it doesn't get attention. And being filmed every day, initially it was very overwhelming. Yeah. It was a lot. I'm more introverted, and having a camera, I mean, I had a mic pack and a camera on
you all the time.
I mean, every day for 3 months.
Yeah.
And I grew a lot as a person, but it really, you get used to it. Mm-hmm. You build a relationship with the film crew, and it's really like you're just talking to a friend. Right. I had to be strategic about making sure to protect my individuals. Right. I feel like a protective mama bear over them. Right. So there were some things that I'm like, no, you're not filming this, or no, we can't do this. But overall, it was a really amazing experience. Definitely one with its challenges. I think it slowed us down some. We make decisions really quickly as a team, and the jail is a really fast-paced environment. And so just logistically with filming, you have to slow down some and actually talk through things and explain what's going on. Yeah, because you're talking to an audience that has never probably seen the inside of a jail before, let alone an addiction recovery program in a jail. Right. And so you have to explain things, and having to slow down for that, it just took more time. So really that was the biggest thing. And then getting used to having the cameras around. So it's every day's an adventure.
Well, Bailey, thank you very much for coming on the show and talking to us about Harp. And I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
All right. Now, make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA. And on Instagram, it's Chesterfield, Virginia, all one word. On Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Make sure you like that and keep up with us as we go forward. Now, let me tell you about all the ways you can check us out. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, as well as our website at Chesterfield.gov/podcast. An audio-only version of the show is available there, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, and a whole host of other programs. You can also watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, and on the weekends at noon, that's Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. And lastly, you can check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us for more ways for you to get in touch with us and for us to get in touch with you. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, and all the good folks here in Communications Media for making this possible. My thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thank you very much for making this a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care.